Hello, beautiful homemakers. I'm going to tell you a little story I wrote, but it's based loosely on a woman I met 30 years ago in the early 1990s. She was in her 80s and her husband was in his 90s. They were an extremely cheerful couple who would always wave to me on my morning walks to the beach. They lived right off Ocean Avenue in Seal Beach, California in a little one-story apartment, and their deck was raised just above sidewalk level. Most days I couldn't chat with them for more than a few seconds because I had to get either to college or to work. But this was a Saturday, so I stopped to talk. I've thought back to her many times over the years, and I know I've confused some of what she told me with embellishments of my own making. So here's the story, take of it what you will. Rose was serving her husband breakfast and using her best china on a tray with flowers in a vase. She looked lovely in her colorful and frilly rose-covered apron, and I commented on how festive everything looked. "It's our 60th wedding anniversary," she chirped. After some preliminary talk, she told me that when she was orphaned, around 1925 or maybe 1928, she decided that the best thing for her to do was to catch a train bound for Hollywood to become a starlet. She was 15 years old. During the last leg of her journey, she decided to get out and stretch her legs at a small train station. There she met a nice-looking man who said, and I'm using my imagination here, "I'll bet a pretty little thing like you is bound for Hollywood. I'm an agent, and I can get you right in at the door. Let me drive you to the studio. I have credentials to get you right past the gates. If you stay on the train, once you reach Union Station in L.A., there will be a gaggle of girls ahead of you in line, and I'm right here. Let me drive you the rest of the way." Well, this sounded like a dream come true to our foolish little heroine. She gathered her things, and off she went with him. The road went through some hills, grew curvy, and hit some straightaways. "Just another few hours," he said. She was excited to catch glimpses of the ocean. But then it seemed to her they were leaving Los Angeles far behind. They drove away up the coast, and after a while they turned off into some woods. She began to get nervous. "Where are we going?" "Straight to the decision-makers, darlin'," he reassured her. Soon they reached a large house that appeared to be, perhaps, an inn. She was taken to a back parlor where she saw many other girls, and none of them were happy. She tried to leave, but was forced to stay. She was trapped. She had been taken to a brothel. She was there 3 long years until a customer grew a conscience and realized the girls weren't there by choice, and went to the police and told them he could take them to raid this brothel and free the girls. Rose was rescued by a cop in his early 30s. He posed as a customer, chose her, went up to her room, talked with her, got the lay of the land, left, and then came back with the rest of the police officers. The girls were rescued and taken back to the city where they could call family members to take them home. This young man put Rose into his car, but she had no one to call. She was alone in the world. She didn't know what to do, so she just cried and begged him not to take her to an institution. After hours of tears and driving, he relented and told her she could stay with him until she knew what to do. She could have his bed, and he would sleep on the couch. She was so thankful. The next morning she got up and made him breakfast. He nodded his thanks and went off to work. She got busy cleaning his dirty apartment. She washed every pot, pan, and utensil. She scrubbed the sink, counters, cabinets, and floors. She made up the bed and the couch. She swept. She scoured the bathroom. And she did it all in the nude because it was hot, and she only had the one dress. Later, she began wearing one of his old shirts around the house when he was gone, and she slept in it as well. But when he came home, she was in her dress. She took a guess at what time he'd be home, and she had dinner ready and piping hot for him. and this was repeated for a week or two. But after the first day of compliments, he didn't seem very grateful. In fact, he was downright grouchy. She just kept her head down, thought all men were brutes, cried after he went off to work, had nowhere to go and was too scared to leave the apartment, and kept cleaning and cooking until there was no food left to cook or bake. One morning she mentioned that if he wanted eggs for his breakfast tomorrow, she was going to need some groceries. He went out and brought some home. The pattern continued for another few weeks. She began to love her little apartment and looked forward to him coming home, even though he rarely smiled at her, didn't talk much, and would just lie down and listen to the radio. She began to sing. She got happier and happier. She felt safe. She even felt safe leaving the apartment to go to the corner grocery. He would give her a few dollars, and she always spent them wisely. But the next time when she mentioned she needed food money, he only handed her $1. And then, that night, he came home drunk. She hid in the bedroom. He apologized to her the next day, and the pattern repeated. Then one day he asked her what her plans were, and told her she needed to leave and find a husband, that she would be a good wife. It finally occurred to her why he was always so grouchy. He had a woman living in his house, sleeping in his bed, acting like a wife, but he couldn't touch her. She wasn't his wife, and he wasn't going to lump himself in with those other men. He needed a wife, and she realized that he didn't want her to be that wife. She hung her head and said she had no money, no clothes, nowhere to go. She apologized that being a housekeeper was not enough. He kind of woke up at that point. She had no other clothes. She was wearing the same clothes day after day, and he hadn't even noticed. He told her he would take her shopping and buy her some clothes, and he did. She was so happy shopping with him. She pretended that he was her husband. She knew she loved him. But then she'd remember that he didn't love her, and the hurt would return to her eyes. He was delighted with her lovely ways and kindnesses. She was a good cook and a great housekeeper. She was cheerful. She didn't yell or try to correct him. But when he began to look upon her with love in his eyes, he would see hurt and pain in hers. He knew that she needed a husband, but that she didn't love him. It was time for her to go. Her new clothes were packed in a little suitcase. He gave her some money. She walked out the door. She took a few steps and looked back at him. He shooed her on with his hands. She took a few more steps. She looked back again. His head was down. "I would rather not go," she whispered. "I would rather stay with you. I would rather be your wife." He looked at her, strode towards her, and took her in his arms and kissed her. They were married at the courthouse, for neither of them had any family. And now they were celebrating 60 years together. But I forgot to tell you what started her off telling me this story in the first place. A couple nearby were arguing, and she told me that she never argued with her husband. "That's impossible," I retorted. "All couples argue." "Oh, I do get annoyed with him, that's for sure. But I don't argue with him, for he is my provider, my protector, and he rescued me. Whenever I want to blow up at him, I remember that he rescued me, and then I just want to kiss him and serve him. And I've never forgotten her. Isn't that also so true of Jesus? He's my provider, my protector, and he rescued me. There have been times I've argued with my husband, getting him back for saying something that hurt my feelings. And I've thought of Rose and how she never argues. But I felt I'd never be able to do that. I react much too quickly. However, over many years, I've learned how far thank you goes in making home more peaceful. When I thank my husband for everything he does, he begins thanking me for everything I do, too. When I ask him to do something and then he disregards what I just said and does something else, instead of blowing up and screaming, "I just said," I realize that the meaning of my words weren't very clear, and that he interpreted it differently than how I meant it. I bite my tongue and realize it isn't a big deal at all. So what if yet another towel is dirty? Is one more towel to wash worth tension in the air of me screaming, "Why are you using a new towel?" Of course not. So I let it go. If I want fewer towels to wash, then I need to give the excess away. Begin thanking your husband for every little thing. Bite your tongue when you want to correct him. Sit back and let him drive. Unless you really think he's on autopilot, going to the final destination instead of the first stop, like putting gas in the car or dropping by the post office. Use gentle reminders. "Darling, did you forget about putting gas in the car, or are we going to a new station?" Or, "Are you taking me to a new post office on the way?" Sometimes he will say, "I forgot, thanks for the reminder." Other times he'll smile and say, "New destination." When he helps you by transferring laundry into the dryer and incorrectly uses the hottest setting, just change the setting when you notice it. Don't yell about his mistake. To prevent the mistake in the future, put up a cheat sheet. Delicates dry on the lowest setting, etc. It can be nicely typed and printed or just on a post-it note. Remember Rose. We don't have too many examples like her anymore, do we? Society is telling us we can do anything a man can do and do it better. The Bible is telling us to have a meek and quiet spirit, but society tells us meek and quiet gets us stepped on, and you aren't a doormat, so you'd better speak up. Women who fret, who are lazy, who are weak-minded, who live in fear of whatever the news tells them to fear, who focus on negatives, who need to drink alcohol to steady their nerves, who are loud and stubborn, who shout about their rights and their body, who are aggressive, self-serving, pushy, and who lash out at others. These are the women, men, and all people avoid. But a gentle and quiet woman, one who allows God to transform her life by prayer and through studying His holy word, a woman who is content and joyful, this is a woman people flock to be around. It's one thing to make your wants known. I want Mexican food. I want Italian food. I want a screen door. I want a massage. You can state your wants. They may not be fulfilled, but you can state them. Don't expect your husband to read your mind of your wants. But also, don't give him a piece of your mind. Don't scold him. Let him talk without interruption or correcting his retelling of a story. When you begin holding your tongue, he may even respond with, "Either you aren't interrupting me as much, or it doesn't bother me anymore." Let it be the former. Not too long ago I had a frozen shoulder. My husband had to help me with many things around the house, And some of these chores I never took back on once I healed, such as hefting up the 20-pound bag of cat food and pouring it into smaller containers. At first it was difficult for me to sit quietly in the car while he loaded up all the groceries. I felt guilty for not helping. But he didn't need or want my help. I began to enjoy sitting in a nice warm car while he did all the work. I couldn't even remove my own coat. When I asked for help with it, he removed it, then I gave him a kiss. And he cupped my face and said, "You are so beautiful." I graciously received the compliment and simply said, "Thank you." Now, my looks hadn't changed, but my attitude had. I had a quiet spirit, and that made all the difference. Be pleasable. Accept the genteelness of being a woman, the elegance, the politeness, the manners of a well-bred woman, and men will be gentle with you, will open car doors and store doors for you, will help you on or off with your coat, will lift heavy things for you, and will generally be drawn to you. Your husband and all men will love your meek and quiet spirit that is so pleasing to God. Meek simply means patient, quiet of temper, gentle. The antonym of meek is domineering and blustering. A beautiful woman who is gorgeously arrayed, but who speaks harshly and is loud, brash, and impudently opinionated, is ugly to all. To display a meek and quiet spirit means you are full of love and compassion. Elizabeth Elliot said it's a spiritual quality and it springs from love. So let me say it again. Your husband and all men will love your meek and quiet spirit that is so pleasing to God. A person with a quiet spirit rests easy, knowing she is provided for, protected, and rescued. May God bless you as you learn to walk with the meek and quiet spirit.